Hey guys, it's Dovid Konikov here, and Naftali Bennet has been a great advocate for Israel throughout this war, and it all started on the BBC with this interview slash debate that he had with this news anchor. Check out how he pretty much puts her in her place.
You will know that the head of the UN and many others have said wars have rules. And forgive me if I quote some of the Geneva Convention to you. Article 43, basic rule: the parties to the conflict shall confine their operations to the destruction or weakening of the military resources of the adversary, and shall make a distinction between the civilian population and combatants, and between civilian objects and military objectives. So
that's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly why we are allowing the civilians to evacuate before pounding them. We're doing the opposite.
It's not exactly what you're doing.
No, wait, you asked the question. Would you let me answer?
Go ahead.
What Hamas, ISIS did is they entered roughly 30 communities. Whenever they can, they butchered babies. They burnt them alive. They pulled a baby out of pregnant moms and then beheaded the baby, beheaded the mom. They raped young girls. This is what we're dealing with. And with all due respect, I think the Geneva Conventions, first and foremost, tell a country, you need to defend yourself. And we will defend ourselves. We're going out of our way. I know that last week a hospital was fired by Islamic Jihad that fired a rocket on it, and BBC said that it was Israel, but it wasn't Israel. And I understand that BBC has taken a side of on the Gazan side, because all your questions are only about the Gazan civilians.
That's not
true.
You
haven't asked one question.
That's not
you haven't
true.
asked one question
I began
about
by
those children. From the very beginning of this interview, you just are asking me about them.
Mr.
But
Bennett,
it seems
that
that
is
you care
not true.
little about our side. Oh, it is.
Mr.
What
Bennett, I
began
by talking about the hostages. And what I'm asking you about now is...
No, I'm not talking about the hostages. I'm talking about the babies that were murdered. And you keep on caring only about one side, but that is the BBC way. But let me tell you something. We're here protecting you. We don't need your protection. And if you think there's a balance here between two equal sides, then you are lacking moral clarity. And BBC, I must say, is lacking moral clarity. What you guys did last week, shame on you.
Rough. He's not holding back here, and it just continued like this. He just completely, utterly destroyed her. Here's the rest of the interview slash debate.
Before we spoke to you, Mr. Bennett, I spoke to a veteran Palestinian politician, and I asked her about the massacre of Israeli citizens in southern Israel. I want to ask you now about the long-term strategy. Who runs Gaza? Let's say the Israeli military manages to wipe out Hamas. Who runs Gaza the day after?
Well, I assume they'll develop civilian leadership based on the localities and on the Gazans themselves, but it won't be Hamas.
Right. What about what Joe Biden said last week, which is, of course, Israel has the right to defend itself, but do not make the mistakes that the US, the UK made after 9/11? What do you think he means by that?
Well, I don't know. You'd need to ask him. What I know is that our big mistake is that for 20 years, we have again and again listened to the world. We've always contained this. We never went out to eradicate Hamas. That was the biggest mistake we made.
And that's the rest of the world's... Was that the rest of the world's fault then, rather than...
No, it's our fault. It's our fault. It's only Israel's fault. Though the world back then and now is basically telling us, cool down, let's go for a ceasefire. So our big mistake is that we listen to the world. I'm not blaming the world. The world has always been hypocritic about the Jewish state. I'm blaming us for listening to them. Because at the end of the day, we have to protect ourselves. And, you know, I assume you wouldn't want ISIS to live in your neighborhood, and you would demand that your government eradicate ISIS. That's what our people want to, and we're going to do that.
At some point, will Israeli politicians have to sit down with Palestinian politicians to talk about the long term?
Look, I'm fine with any talks always, but the truth is, unfortunately, that Hamas enjoys massive public Palestinian support. That's the sad truth, that we sort of like to.
Well, we don't know
hide.
that. We actually don't know that.
We actually do.
The last
you know why?
elections.
Let me give you.
The last elections were in
give you some
2006.
stats. Yeah, and you know that Hamas got a full majority, an overwhelming majority of the electorate.
It was a decade and a half ago.
I'm fine. Go and do elections. I can tell you that right.
And then it sort of blocked out there. And I think that Hamas and Gaza, the idea that Hamas doesn't have this massive majority and massive popularity there, I don't think is the case. I think that there is a big push and popularity for Hamas in Gaza. You just look at the crowd of Gazans that are essentially surrounding the hostages, and you have the Hamas that are protecting the hostages from these mob that wants to lynch the hostages. And you can just see it from that picture of one of the hostages just like crowding down. I think it was Arbel Yahud, essentially all the Gazan mob just on top of her, and then a few Hamas protecting her from them. And it's a sad state of affairs in Gaza. For more, subscribe to the channel. If you want to help us make more of these videos, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/JewishUncensored. Thank you, and have a good one.